Hi guys, welcome
Hey.
back for another episode. We're very excited to have our newfound friend Charlie on the podcast. Mandy, who was in our last episode, if you didn't listen to that, go back and listen to it because she was brilliant, brought up brain spotting and how it has helped her to resolve a lot of her trauma that's been stored in her body. And she had mentioned to us that she learned this about it from Charlie, and he is here to be a brain wizard and tell us all about it and explain a lot of the science that goes into it and how it works. And we're just
All in between.
we're so excited that you came on to talk about this. It's so fascinating, and I feel like everybody can use this information. So
Yeah, if you like to geek out like we do, you're in for a ride this next hour.
And if you've had trauma that you feel like you can't resolve, like no matter what you've tried, this is really the episode for you.
Yes. So, Charlie, without further ado, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah,
please?
tell us how you got into all of this.
Okay, great. Charlie, I've been, in the counseling field since 2006. So start, a little bit earlier than that, because I grew up in, a family that was dysfunctional. There's a lot of violence, a lot of drug and alcohol use, and so I have my history of tons of substance use and alcohol use, and through much of my life, and then fortunate enough to find people to support me to get clean and sober, and somewhere along that ride, there was a guy at the hospital directing the behavioral health department, and he said, you should be a counselor. I thought it was a ridiculous idea, but by then I'd learned how to follow other people's directions instead of mine. So he told me to do some stuff, and then they hired me, and so I've been a counselor since 2006. So working in substance use disorder primarily at that time, and it was just so clear. Like when I started working back then, the research said, man, we think that maybe up to 50% of the people with substance use problems have some kind of co-occurring disorder. And then it was like 4 or 5 years later, they're like, no, we think it might be 70%. And then it was a few years later, like, no, it might be everybody. It might be everybody. So our understanding of co-occurring disorders and really trauma has really changed a bunch in the last 10 years, but especially the last 20 years, where our thought of trauma was so narrowly focused before. It didn't explain things like I grew up in an alcoholic family. It didn't explain that kind of trauma in our kind of old explanation of PTSD. So I'm working with a lot of substance use disorder people, and in a residential treatment center in Alaska, we have people that come in from the villages that have just so much horrific trauma in so many of the people I work with. I mentioned villages, that's certainly true of a traumatic experience for many, but it's just like everybody that I'm coming across has these, the etiology, the root of symptoms tended to be trauma, and what we had before to attend to trauma symptoms was, it was about creating a safe space and being very consistent, and you'd have this little window of opportunity during a therapeutic session, if things aligned right, where you could kind of do some trauma reprocessing, and then you'd have to kind of wrap them back up, and it tended to be slow and not super effective. So I was always looking for a way to, how can I help people get to what I know today is clearly the root of substance use disorder. When I work with kiddos, like in high schools or whatever, like everybody knows, like, why do people use? And they're all like, I got something inside I got to get rid of, and I need to change how I feel. And that something inside was the thing that we couldn't really get to very well. And so when I discovered brain spotting and started using that, I started seeing we're getting right to it. So that's really, it's kind of a miracle that I found brain spotting. It's just a friend of mine who's up in Fairbanks, and he happens to be our state trainer. And I don't even remember how we connected, but he's like, hey, I got a training coming up, and back in beginning of 2019, I took that first training and just started using it right away, and the outcomes have been just amazing. So I know, like, this is the thing. This allowed me to get to that stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've heard a lot about how you started Brain Spotting. How did Brain Spotting itself get started? I want to hear about that.
Let's talk about that, and then maybe tell us before you get too far into that, what is Brain Spotting, so that people know why it is they should care about it first.
Yeah, where to start there? So maybe we'll get a little bit of both of those.
Yeah, combine them.
Yeah.
In any way you see fit.
So David Grand is the developer of Brain Spotting. I know we'll talk about kind of resources later, so I'll mention it again. But brainspotting.com has, showcases him, and I think there's a video from him on that front homepage there that will talk more about Brain Spotting. There's a lot of information out there now about it, so we got to be careful what we're looking at, because anybody can YouTube, they can post whatever. But brainspotting.com is the guy, is the originator. And he was working, as a therapist in New York and working with a lot of high acuity trauma, and was working with EMDR, and just found it too activating for most of his people. So he developed this, like, man, that's so stimulating, so activating, I want to slow this thing down. And he developed a type of EMDR he called natural flow EMDR, and was actually training on it where it really slowed things down. And then one day he was working with actually a figure skater, and he had been working with it for over a year, I guess, with this natural flow EMDR. And her primary issue was she's an Olympic figure skater, and she couldn't do this triple loop jump, and she should have been able to. She could do things much more complicated, all this stuff around it, but just couldn't pull this one off. And he was working with this natural flow EMDR, and they kind of have this more rapid movement. But he was doing this, slowed it down a little bit, and he just noticed at one point when he was moving his finger that her eyes did this thing. He said her eyes wobbled. And he just instinctively kind of stopped there, and then watched her body process the held distress around this triple toe loop that she couldn't do. And she said, like, I remember when I was a kid and I was trying to practice that thing, I overheard my mom on the side of the ring on the phone divorcing my dad. Mm-hmm. And it was never talked about in her family. It was just an event that happened that she never got to process. She was never, she just shoved it down and kept, trying to do her best. And in that moment with the eye wobble, it accessed that information in the subcortical brain, processed it, and then the lady was doing treatment. So David is like, holy cow, what just happened?
This just worked.
Before you get further, I just want to, for people that aren't familiar with EMDR, it's a form of therapy, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, where you'll be looking at the facilitator, and they have their finger going from side to side, left to right, to kind of see where your eyes go and how they. What's the science behind that?
Yeah, we want to maybe get into that one a little bit. I am not trained in EMDR. I know the difference.
That's okay. I just want to.
And brain spotting. EMDR
Yeah.
is they set a list of things that we're going to work on, and then the practitioner will say, this is what we're going to work on today, and then you think of this thing, and then they do this, and there's some other stimulators that happen in the process, and your eyes are following their fingers, but it's not an attuned process like brain spotting is. So those fingers are moving, and they're not stopping them. They're just letting your brain do what it does. And that's very different than brain spotting. And I know we want to kind of get into what is brain spotting look like. But if we're looking at some of the differences, EMDR as a kind of a list of traumas that you have, and we're going to attend to them, and the clinician's going to direct how we do this. Brain spotting is very attuned. If I'm sitting with you and I'm moving this pointer, there's several ways we might find an eye position. but your nervous system and my nervous system are connected. This attunement is imperative in brain spotting. And I'm going to notice the minute, minuscule nervous system responses of your body and your eyes. And I see all kinds of things that the nervous system instinctively, reflexively attends to when we bring up a felt sense of whatever we're working on. And it's our attunement that both holds the frame of whatever is showing up and that identifies where that access spot is that we're going to move into. So it's 100% client driven. And I'm just noticing and sitting present with. And another thing that is different is in brain spotting, you're going to come into the office with whatever frame we're in. I don't tell you what we're working on. We don't have a checklist. You're going to come in and I'm just going to say, hey, how's it going? Is there something you want to work on today? Or, how's your week been? And people go, ugh, my boss is being or whatever. And I'll say, is that something you want to work on? And they're like, yeah, I've been really thinking about this thing. And then, so whatever that felt sense of, for humans, it's like, I'm not being heard, I'm being mistreated, right? There's a thing, the felt sense of something, and that thread is right where you're at today. And it will tie into whatever your brain wants it to tie into. So we're going to go wherever that brain needs to go. And that's the frame. The client brings the frame in. So there's some very significant differences between how EMDR operates and how brain spotting operates. I know when we started this combination question, it's kind of like, how did brain spotting develop? And there's another part of the question too. So David Grand, he develops this thing with the ice skater, and then he just starts asking his colleagues. He's like, "Man, I saw this thing. You got to do this, do this stuff, and tell me what you see." And really developed the theory from the experience. But there was another part to the question, Matt.
Just to explain what brain spotting is, like how it works. What
I guess
you could take us through like a sample session,
that would be cool.
of what a person would expect when they would go, and that would maybe be helpful.
Yeah, so a couple more big chunks. I'll tell you, maybe we'll go through a sample session and then we'll talk a little bit about the mechanics as we know it. It's really, it's the nervous system as we don't understand it. One of the primary principles of brain spotting, we call it the uncertainty principle, and again, a big difference between other therapies and brain spotting. I got no idea what's happening in there. It is your personal experience, and I don't even need to know, honestly.
Mm-hmm. I like that about this. It's not talk therapy, right? You don't have to talk about your trauma. You just have to feel the trauma.
And work through it.
It's going to show up however it shows up, wherever your brain is ready to go. And it's totally you directed, not me directed. And there's a real powerful principle here in the uncertainty principle. I know you guys kind of have to keep me on track. But the uncertainty principle, if I'm a therapist and I'm sitting with you, you already walk in with a power differential, right? Like I'm the person who's supposed to know and you're the person who doesn't, and that's not what brain spotting is about. It's not like that at all. In brain spotting, you are the person that knows. I am the one that doesn't. You are the expert on your experience. If we come into this space and it's the other way around, and I think I know what you're doing right now, I'm literally limiting your experience as we sit together. Right? We know quantum physics tells us about it. Molecules literally respond differently based on who's in the room. How I'm thinking affects how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
If I am sitting with you and I know this is what you're doing, I'm not promoting your personal progress. If I'm sitting with you and I am totally open and have no idea where we're going and supporting you with love and wellness in this space with you, as I attune and sit with you closely, just really connected with you, it allows us to have a felt sense of safety and process. If we can't have that felt sense of safety, we can't do it. And it just allows us to go wherever we need to go without being constrained by, the therapist that's supposed to be helping us get there, but still like held in a frame of safety enough to do that.
Like, I just think of, when you say that, I'm gonna step in real quick. I think of, like, when we're developing relationships with people, that's exactly how it has to be. Like, you have to have the openness, trust, and safety with any relationship.
Well,
like,
I mean, you don't have to, but you should.
Yeah. Well, to be a
healthy way.
successful.
Yes.
To be a successful relationship, yeah. So.
So a person comes into your office, you are the person that doesn't know, you're trusting that they know their experience, they know what they're feeling, and then what happens from there?
So, we'll have done an assessment. It tells me, do you have a safe place to live right now? Like, because we're not going to unpack some stuff. If you're going home to an abusive relationship, like, we're going to make a different plan. So assessment gives us some basic information about people. We do some screeners, right? Because I want to know where's our baseline right now. Because that's going to tell me, too. In 90 days here, we're going to do this again. We're going to see if what we're doing is working or not. So we do that. So we're not,
operating blindly.
We know each other in the first session.
Got it.
We do some of the things that are useful, and some of the things are kind of required. Unfortunately, insurance drives a certain thinking about and certain processes. So we take care of that stuff. Then we're coming into the session, and we've already had conversation about what brain spotting is. Kind of call it front loading. Like, it is an experiential therapy, not intellectual therapy. So I'll explain it to you, but you don't really know until you're doing it, because it's an experience. It's not a frontal lobe thinky thing. Right?
So you can explain it as well as you can, but you are not going to really understand until you have experienced it.
Right.
Gotcha.
Still, it's useful for people to know, what am I going to expect here? So we'll have talked about that. So then they come in, we're ready to do the work. And often people, if you're coming in for a brain spotting session, there's probably a little bit of energy that you've spent attending to what might I like to do here. Some things that maybe have been keeping you up at night or whatever. So sometimes I'll ask, is there something, something you want to work on today? Or sometimes, often, it's just so organic in conversation where people say, I'm staying up at night worrying about this thing. And I'll just say, is that what you want to work on today? And they might say, yep. Or some people, with significant trauma that don't want to talk about it. I have a lady, she'll come in. I'll say, is there something you want to work on today? She goes, yep. And that's as much as I know, that there's something she wants to work on, that she's been thinking about. And then we go here and say, when you think about this, what feeling shows up for you? And I do that because they're going to say a word, and I want to capture that word. I want to use it later because we're going to come back to this thing. So they're going to say, when I think of this, I get all panicky. Now, we kind of do this kind of funnel idea, right? We're still in the frontal lobe here. You're describing this thing for me, and you say, yep, I get panicky. I say 0 to 10 if it's organic. This is how it's taught, but brain spotting is like, don't do something because it's protocol. As soon as no, we got to go back and I have to ask you 0 to 10, then it's no longer brain spotting. So that's kind of the part of the uniqueness of this creative, co-attuned experience. But often, I'll say, how much can you notice this panic is 0 to 10? 0 none at all, and 10 the most you can imagine. And so they'll say, it's a 7. Okay, where do you notice that panic that is a 7 in your body? And now people they're coming in, this experience, noticing my body. This is a mindfulness piece that starts to get us away from the intellect, down into this limbic system, or sometimes we call it cortical and subcortical, kind of interchangeable language that I use sometimes, frontal lobe and limbic area. So we start to get more into this limbic subcortical area with the mindful noticing. And that's really important for especially trauma processing, to be able to stay somehow. Sometimes we have to bring people back into the now, and brain spotting tends to keep people rooted in the now because they're in the body. And the body keeps us here and not in the trauma. So they'll say, it's a 7, panic 7 right here in my chest. And I'll just say, all right. Just noticing, being mindful of that 7 in the chest. Just want you to follow this point. And we're just gonna be curious together about what shows up. Initially, in brain spotting sessions for me, not all clinicians favor to do it the same way. One, there's 2 kind of models for brain spotting. One is an activation model, one is a resource model. And, they meld together. I tend to be an activation. I tend to go for activation. I want, this is what David Grand talks about that I really like, I want the quickest, most effective, most powerful healing possible right now. And
As does everyone.
Right?
And we do that by finding the activation. Some people, whether it's the therapist, unsure of, my ability to hold the space for you, they might want to go resource model. Or sometimes there's reasons where people will come in. 90% of the people will work with activation model. With the trading, they would get right out of the gate. Some people, the trauma is so significant, or we'll talk more, in a minute about the vagal nerve and the processes there. Some people learn over and over and over and over again that I need to check out. And so they'll be so dissociative that as soon as we go to touch on the activation, I'm gone. So then they fall outside of this window of tolerance. And so a resource model is really good. So it's, instead of coming at a 7, we're going to come at this thing at a 3, because that's what you can tolerate and manage. So there's some really powerful reasons why we might do resource. But I tend to go to activation first. I'm getting to know your nervous system. And we're also building a brain-body connection. Because I think, this is a theory I have, I don't know, it's the nervous system, we don't know it. But it seems to me that people I work with a lot of people with substance use disorder histories, not only, there's a lot of people that don't have substance use histories that I work with. But I will ask, I say, what do you notice that in your body? And people will be like, body?
What do you mean?
Should I feel my body?
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
We get so disconnected on purpose from our body that we don't have this brain-body connection. So one of the ways we will do it in brain spotting, once we build a brain-body connection, is I might say that panic in the chest there, do you feel that more over here, or over here? And they go, oh, it's definitely right. Okay, do you feel it more up here or down here? It's above. Okay, so, nope, it's right there. And you will help me find that spot. Initially, people don't tend to have that brain-body connection, at least with the people that I tend to work with. So instead, I'm going to say, notice and be mindful of that spot in your chest, and just notice this pointer. And again, there's different ways to do this. We don't always use a pointer. Some people come in and they just lock their head. I feel so disconnected. They're already
Staring at the
At the
point.
point.
So why would I go, hey, stop that? I want to be a
Yeah.
therapist.
Right.
Wait, let me do this pointer thing first.
Yeah. As soon as we get into protocol, it's no longer brain spotting, which is a little complex. A lot of people, like the trainers, would be like, I know, I'm just going to ask you to unlearn everything you think you know right now. as
Yeah.
a therapist.
People feel like they need a framework to work from.
Yeah, it's how smart
And this
I
is
am.
more intuition based, which,
Yeah.
I mean, I think everything should be. So it's kind of cool that it's something that's being taught.
It's a natural human process. That's why I'm so confident in it. I already know you are built to be able to access and heal. I'm just helping to get there. You have everything you need. You have all the information you need and know exactly how to do it. There's no way I could know how you need to do that. We're just creating the space and the way to access it. And again, we'll talk a little more about that in the vagal tone thing, how our body, our frontal lobe gets disconnected from the limbic area on purpose. It's part of how we manage our world when we can't manage our world.
Yeah, not safe, disconnect.
Yeah, totally. And then our body's screaming and we're like, shut up, until we drink whatever,
Yeah.
smoke whatever.
Stop talking to me. I don't want to hear you.
And there's
I'm not dealing with
nothing I
that.
can do. That's right. So on purpose, we get disconnected. So initially, I start with this pointer. We start to build this brain-body connection. The pointer will go across the field of vision. I have the 7, the panic in the chest. Mindfully noticing that. I move this pointer. People's nervous systems will tell me where to stop, that there's information. Sometimes it's lots of points across there, and I intuitively go, man, we're going to hold on this spot. Sometimes I'll go across and we'll get nervous system responses, and I'll just move kind of slowly all the way across, and then we'll slowly move back, and I'll get nervous system responses again. I go, yep, that's the biggest. We're going to take that one. That seems to be most activated. Or kind of an intuitive kind of, yeah, there's definitely something there. Nervous system responses we tend to get, probably the most common, a lot of eyes start blinking like rapidly, bodies really commonly flinch initially, and then in process, if we find that spot during process, cores, like the core of the body will flinch, shoulders jerk. You can see people's fingers like going at a speed they don't normally go. I had this lady that it was almost like every time and we start moving this pointer across the visual field, as soon as we get to that spot, eyes just roll back in her head and she's like, and I'm like, wow, what's going on here? Like, I'm just so curious about, and then she just come out of it 40 minutes later. She goes, whew, that was good.
Like, well, this is the easiest session I've ever done.
They're all like, there's some kind of common nervous system things we'll see, but it's just so unique. Some people are so contained. I got a guy I work with that brain-body connection is still growing. He'll be like, I don't know where I feel that. But when I move the pointer across, he's so contained. He's had to keep it together his whole life so much. When we get to that spot, his cheek is this side of the cheek right here. Little tiny, it just starts vibrating. For like a half a second, the cheek will vibrate and then stop. That's his nervous, that's as much as I'm getting.
It's his tell.
Where other people, we get in this spot and they're like, mouths drop open, bodies flinch back. And I've seen when they start processing, like this lady would get this huge, like a red welt would show up right here as she processes, and 30, 40 minutes later that thing goes away, and then she comes out of processing and it's gone.
So what happens during processing? It's when you're just holding that space, right? That space with your pointer and that space emotionally for them to feel safe, to just continuously feel what they're feeling in their body in a safe way, kind of focus on it until it dissipates?
Yeah, so that's such a great question. We do use bilateral sound if you want. It's not mandatory. Most people like it and prefer it. It's a way to communicate with part of the nervous system that you're safe. It's the middle ear part of the nervous system. The sounds in bilateral music is developed by David Grand. There's a few things out there now, but David Grand developed specifically prosodic, which means kind of safe for the nervous system sounds, and it moves from one ear to the other and kind of goes like this, like, so you can feel it, like it almost tickles your brain a little bit as it moves. So it's all part of that, and the attunement with the therapist, we're creating a felt sense of safety. Then we find this eye position that is connected to the nervous system. We're literally bypassing the frontal lobe and getting to the limbic, or the subcortical area. The frontal lobe is very useful for many things, but it's not here. It's powerful. I thought about this. Such a great, I think it's a great conversation all the time. But for growing up adults, we hold every experience that we've ever had in our lifetime in the body and limbic area of the brain. We cannot access that information from the frontal lobe. There's no way for us to do it on purpose.
Can't think our way out of it.
We've gotten blocked from that. That's right. So we bypass the frontal lobe, access this nervous system, where it's held in the nervous system, and my body just told me there's information held there because I have this felt sense of this, the nervous system responds, there's something there. What's there? I don't know. Then the brain will go wherever it goes. People will sometimes I've had it described back to me where it's just like going through a photo album of memories. Then every time I felt this panic in my chest, memory after memory after memory. Some people don't do that at all. It's just a real body sensation and they feel stuff moving through their body. Some combination of both. The frontal lobe can do whatever it wants. The limbic, the nervous system is already tapped into here. So when we're in process, the nervous system is doing what it needs to do, just how it knows how to do it, accessing whatever information it's accessing. I am attuned to the person, watching the nervous system. People tend to process like this, where it gets really intense, and then they're like, whew. And then it gets really intense again. And I'll want to check in. I'll usually just let people process, especially initially, because we're like so not used to getting to the limbic system for processing. It's like we're getting a machete out and just hacking a trail to the limbic system. So I will get that pointer there in the nervous system, and I'm not going to say anything for 20, 30 minutes. That's pretty common for me, as the brain and body just work on what they need to work on. When I do say something, if it looks like somebody is really having a hard time, I'm going to lean in. I'm going to make sure they know I'm there. I'm going to say, hey, I'm right here with you. Just let me know if you need any kind of support. I can help you out with that. Because there's a lot of things we can do if we want it in the window of tolerance. So 10, great, let's process. But if you're at a 12, I want to bring it back down to a 9. And there's several ways we can do that to help the nervous system regulate. But it's so rare. It's really rare. People have an ability. Their brain knows just what they need to do and how much they can do it. That's how our nervous system works. It keeps us from too much.
Is it hard for people to stay in the process? I feel like sometimes when I'm thinking about this, like if I were to be your patient, I could maybe get there, like feel it for a second, but then I feel like I would intuitively like, okay, I don't like that, and snap back out into like back into my frontal lobe.
Yeah,
do you find that happens with people, or do you find that once they're in that spot and you have them, that they can kind of stay there?
Initially, I think what you're describing happens quite a bit, and that's why we just sit there for 20 minutes. Like the frontal lobe is like, no, don't go there. Hey, think about all this stuff you got to do, right? The frontal lobe will go, why am I sitting here staring at a stick? It'll do all kinds of stuff to try to keep you from accessing
dealing
that
with it,
limbic
yeah.
area. And so I'll just direct you.
Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Come back to the body. Right? Notice what you're feeling in your chest. And so the frontal lobe will do whatever it needs to do. It throws its little fit, runs around on fire. But if we just stay with this pointer, we've already locked into the nervous system. In 20 minutes, you're going to be dropping in. 30 minutes, we're going to be dropping in. So we'll drop fully into this limbic system, and then that frontal lobe starts to get quieter and quieter. We make up a number because I don't know what it is, and I expect it's different from person to person, but we love things to make sense. And frontal lobe does a really good job of making things make sense. Like even if we got to lie to ourselves, the frontal lobe will make things make sense. It's this felt sense of control. We're like, this equals this, and I got all these things to do, and the frontal lobe loves things making sense. Mm-hmm. If we think about a dream state where you're totally not in your frontal lobe, you're totally subconscious, dream don't make sense, man. We're just gonna throw all this stuff in there. And it's just this totally, what do I call it? It's totally loose association. Frontal lobe loves association. This equals this. Dream state, anything goes.
Willy-nilly, anything happens.
That's right. Totally loose association. And in brain spotting, it's like an in-between those two things. Where we bypass the frontal lobe so our rigid associations can go away, and it allows us to open some doors that we wouldn't normally open. We draw some connections to things we wouldn't normally connect. And the frontal lobe, I bet we are, again, making up numbers, I bet we are 95% frontal lobe in our waking day and 5% limbic, where we notice little feelings of, that doesn't feel so good, that guy creeps me out. But then we just move on and get back to our busy frontal lobe. And in brain spotting, we're like 95% subcortical, 5% cortical.
So going through this process, like on an ongoing regular basis, are you essentially helping people retrain their brain so that this process can just happen naturally?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially, yes. So in a session, I got this panic, it's in my chest, it's at a 7, we find the eye position, they're processing, once in a while they go, and after like 20, 30 minutes or whatever feels appropriate for the co-attuned situation, I might check in, I say, hey, just checking in, what are you noticing, where are you? Sometimes people can't even respond because they're not in that area of the brain, they just go, great, stay with it. Some people will go, man, just all these things coming up, and I feel much better. And I'll say, 0 to 10, where are you? A 3. All right, stay with that 3. See where that takes you. See what's under there. All right, so they'll process it down. We'll get to almost every time I get to a 0, because I start right away and I go for the power. I'm going for the 10s, and I'm going for it right now. And we're not chit-chatting for a half an hour when we start the session. We're getting right to work. We've already done all the pre-things we need to do. So, 40, 45 minutes into this thing, we're down to a 0. Often. Not always, but often. Then I say, okay, I want you to come back to where we started. And I'm going to use that feeling word you started with. If you said panic, I'm going to use panic. You had this panic in the chest. If you said, I feel a wibbly wobbly in my back of my neck, I'm going to say you started with this wibbly wobbly in the back of your neck. I want you to try to bring that back. Think of all the things you thought of, bring up all the feelings you had, bring that back and see what's there. And we'll often have sometimes they'll say, sometimes they won't, whatever, it's so organic, but they'll say, yeah, it's about a 2. Okay, bring it back best you can, see where that 2 takes you. And we are going to just squeeze it and squeeze it, and now it's a 0. Bring it back again. And at the end of the session, I'm saying, now I want you to think about that car accident. I want you to think about all those events or whatever it is. What do you notice? What's there now? Can't bring it up.
It's a car accident. Yeah, it's just like explaining the news or something, huh?
Powerful. Yeah, it's so powerful. Like the way our memories are intended to form. I have an experience. I experience my experience. I say it to my outside world. My outside world affirms that my experience is correct. I make meaning of it. And then it will file back into short-term memory and then long-term memory. Unprocessed memories don't do that. They stay alive. That's why people in a trauma situation in a courtroom are useless. We don't have a beginning and an end in a trauma memory. It doesn't form like that. Mm-hmm. It's not in sequential. And it's one of the things that's happening in brain spotting is it's allowing this stuff to show up in such a powerful way that people will quite regularly have a thing they processed, and then the next session will go, how was that? And they're like, what? I haven't even thought of that. I don't even remember the details of that, because now it's back in memory where it's supposed to be. It's back in 3rd grade or back in 7th grade. I don't remember nothing from 7th grade. Right?
So this isn't something that people would have to do continuously forever, like talk therapy is kind of that way. This is something like once you've addressed that specific trauma, it's filed back and we're done with that one. And then you can, if there's other ones to address, you address those until you are under control,
so
essentially.
Organic, right? So somebody might show up and they're like, man, I'm really thinking of, mom right now. And it might be a specific aspect of mom. How at the end of, mom's life, I didn't get this chance to do this thing. And I might really resolve a lot of that. But then things might still come up because my boss or somebody else reminds me of, this really powerful woman that my mom was or something. So we don't know. There's many aspects to it. It could all resolve right now. It might just resolve this thing. Again, it's what the brain is kind of used to. But I can tell you that we should get into vagal tone in a minute, because that's one of the things that because we asked about, is this, like, what is the point? Do we end this thing and we get better here? Regularly, people come in with and we'll do the screeners. People tend to have anxiety and depression, and honestly, like, whatever other diagnosis might show up, and brain spotting is not, we'll talk about Western medicine thinking probably in a minute, but it does not.
We're definitely going to ask that question.
It doesn't comply with the DSM, which is our manual of diagnosis, which are groups of symptoms, but it will call things like borderline personality disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's not a disorder. It's exactly how humans will respond to those circumstances. It's a traumatic response, not disorder.
I love that you say that. When the first time I heard you say that, it blew my mind. Like, you don't have PTSD. This is how a person would respond to what you've been through.
Yeah.
You're not broken. This is a normal response for a person having gone through what you've been through. And that's so powerful.
Yes. So we know we have a group of symptoms and we want to resolve those symptoms. And the diagnostic world just loves to explain things. Right? So, if you got this group of symptoms, I'm going to call it this. But it pathologizes a normal human experience. And people really, like, we don't think of it that way. We go, I must be broken. People with, like, I get to talk with a lot of people with depression, and they're like, yeah, well, broken because I have this depression. I'm like, hey, so suppose I put a little girl and a family, and then I describe their family. You suppose I might, have depression? She's like, yeah, right? Of course I would. Of course I would. It's just a normal. We sometimes will say it's a normal response for abnormal conditions.
Yes.
Right? We don't want those to be the conditions, but if that's the conditions, we're going to tend to show up. It's going to tend to show up in our lives in these ways. Borderline personality disorder tends to be a way that horrible attachment and invalidating environments show up, mostly in females, and males it'll show up as narcissism. So it's more one than the other. Sometimes borderline will be in males and narcissism in females. That happens, but it's usually the other way around. And they're trauma diagnoses. We don't get those diagnoses. I mean,
you don't grow up with a perfect life and then have that.
Right.
Yeah, I always said that there was, like, I remember being in school, and because I'm in the behavioral health field too, and, like, they were like, is it environmental? Is it sociological? Is it, biological? Those kind of things. And I'm like, well, it's all of it. like it's all of it. You can't just be one or the other.
Yeah. Right. That's why, we can. Most kids that grow up in a substance-using home are probably going to use substances, but we're not all, right? We're not. It doesn't demand it. It doesn't demand it from it. It just makes it more likely. So if I have a family history or some genetic predispositions, and you throw me in this violent home or whatever, it just cranks up the likelihood that we're going to have this kind of symptomology. So regularly in that assessment process, we do some screeners, and I will get, anxiety disorder. I just did it the other day. I had this. We've been working with this lady for, it's usually about 3 months, 4 months, that I want to go back through the screeners and just kind of check in. How are we doing? Her PTSD screener was it's like 47. I get 50s, 55s, 60s all the time. And in that symptom screener, it's like this checklist of 30 common symptoms that capture some categories that they like for diagnosis. But anything over 33 is considered probable PTSD. Most likely we've hit all the categories, and then the symptoms are severe enough to categorize it as this thing. And I get, 50, 55, 60 all the time. And the other day, her assessment anxiety score was 17, which is pretty severe anxiety happening on that screener. And then we took the screeners again, and she scored a 1 on her anxiety screener, and she scored a 1.5 on her PTSD screener. Or maybe it was a 3 or something. It happens all of the time. People with 50 or 60, in about 3 or 4 months, we do this brain spotting, kind of every other week usually, because we'll do a brain spotting, and then sometimes people need to do meaning making. So we kind of talk through. Cognitive behavioral therapy is still very powerful. If I have thinking processes that are ruining my mood all the time, like I need to get that under control. Right? So that's still really important. All the time, 50s, 60s, and then in 3 or 4 months, they're scoring 8s and 10s, and sustain. 6 months later, right? Because they want to sustain it. They're scoring 6 or 3s.
I can think of no other therapy that has the
outcome
of that.
That quickly too.
Yeah.
This quickly.
Literally no longer meet criteria for
months. It's insane. Like, the power of the mind is absolutely insane.
And you said that it strengthens the vagal nerve?
Yeah.
Do you want to touch on that?
And I'll say, people have different experiences with trauma. So I wouldn't say like that every person I work with is absolutely going to no longer meet criteria after 3 months. It just seems like it happens all the time, and it never used to happen. So
yeah, that's a big deal.
We're definitely going somewhere.
You're on to something.
Yeah, definitely. So, let's talk a little bit about, kind of how our nervous system is supposed to work. And this work, we've been walking towards this thing for decades now. Van der Kolk, and it was probably 20 years ago that he wrote The Body Keeps the Score. Great read if you're into this stuff and you like to geek out about it like I do. He was really discovering, wow, right, we do this cognitive stuff and it's helpful to a degree, but it can't get this other held stuff that seems to be in the body. And he was really uncovering the research that says if we have unprocessed stuff, it's showing up in all of these symptomologies, and it's causing all of this physical problem. Not being able to sleep, and heart problems, and dietary problems, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he was uncovering that and really decided or described this idea that we probably should lean towards figuring out how to do what he called a top-down approach, which is our cognitive. Right? If I think nobody likes me, I'm probably not going to have a good relationship. We better get that under control. This cognitive piece, top-down and bottom-up. And he didn't know about brain spotting then. It wasn't really a thing. But he was describing some of these other somatic processing things and how EMDR tended to get to something deeper. And he knew that there's this bottom-up. And the powerful part of that exploration was we have these physical symptoms. The medical world treats the symptoms, but not the cause. Matter of fact, they can't even tell you what the cause is. The Mayo Clinic did a study just a few years ago. They just did this snapshot study. They're like, let's see if we can find the etiology of the people in services with us over this period of time, right? The cause for them being there. And it was something crazy, like over 70% of the people, we can't tell you why you're here. Right? I don't know.
No idea what's causing this.
Because our medical model doesn't tend to do that. Right? If we look at it as therapists, we're like, I know.
Trauma!
I know what it is. This held the stress, right? So Stephen Porges comes around. He's just a genius. He developed this polyvagal theory. And he is such a genius that the other neuroscientists in his field, like he's like, guys, I think this is what's happening here. And the other geniuses in his field is like, you're going to have to dumb that down for us. We don't understand what you're saying. So Porges wrote the handbook, the polyvagal theory handbook, right, to try to put it in terms that most of us have a chance of grasping. And again, if you're a geek like me and you like this stuff, it's a great read. But he really describes like there is this bi-directional communication between the body and the limbic system. And we're always understanding more and more and more about this stuff. So, there's some things coming out where people are like, I don't know if he's completely nailed this thing, and probably not, because we're going to always know more. But he has nailed some really powerful things. Here's our experience. Every experience we ever have in our entire life is the outside world interpreted by our inside world. And we get that information, just a billion bytes of information every nanosecond, through our 5 senses, a felt sense of what that means, and what Porges calls our neuroperception, or it's our brain's way of interpreting that information.
Mm-hmm.
So all is this felt sense of information. We collect it in just so many ways. The 5 senses, there's just the things we can kind of know about. We have a million mirror neurons in our frontal lobe. Like, if I'm in a social situation, my frontal lobe is seeing what you're doing, and it wants to mirror you because I need to belong. And my cognitive part of my brain is not picking up that any of us are doing it. Right?
Yeah, that's like a little trick you can do where you like scratch your nose and then the person next to you or in front of you scratches their nose.
Yep.
Yeah.
They just mirror you without realizing it. You cross your arms, the person in front of you crosses their arms.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Our brains need to belong, and it just has all these very powerful and very quick ways that it works to collect information and perceive that information. And our perceiving of that information is based on those nurture-nature things that you were talking about earlier. Like, if I grow up in a violent environment, I'm probably going to perceive that look on your face as threatening. Where if I don't, I'm less likely to, right? If we're going down to the river here to go fishing, and a bear runs right in front of us across the trail, like, Holly, you might think, that was awesome. Like, I'm going to post about that right now. And I might think, I almost died. I'm never going fishing again. And then the bodies will respond appropriately to how we perceive it.
Mm-hmm.
Very powerful. So our bodies collect this information, hold it based on our perception of that information. It collects through, we have a million nerve endings that go from this cranial nerve bundle out to our extremities. It's collecting information. And it brings all this information into that cranial nerve bundle. We have 11 cranial nerves in that bundle, and the longest is the vagus nerve. The most popular is the vagus nerve. It winds from
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Unfortunately, that can be true if it's unprocessed.
Until you get brain spotting. I should be their spokesman, and that's their catchphrase.
So this vagus nerve collects this information. It goes from the bottom of the spine through every major organ, up through, the heart, the stomach. That's why if I'm anxious, I get butterflies in the stomach, right? If I don't have good mental health, I don't have good gut health. If I don't have good gut health, I don't have good mental health. They're just it's all so connected and tied together. So it goes through, those major organs up into the back of the throat. It goes into the limbic area of our brain, this experiential part of our brain. It goes to the middle ear part of our brain. It goes to the eyes and face. That's our nervous system. It is not connected to the frontal lobe just in and of itself. There's supposed to be this feedback loop between the limbic area and the frontal lobe. So I have this experience that happens much quicker than the thinking brain. Think about if you put your hand on a hot stove, like the nervous system pulls that baby right off, right?
Yep.
And then the frontal lobe goes like, oh, is that on? The nervous system goes, good job, brain.
Oh, did I touch that?
Oh, that was hot.
It's literally 100 times slower. The nervous system is 100 times quicker than the frontal lobe. It is making decisions for us all of the time. That's why it's such a powerful conversation to have in growing up for adults. If I got stuff that's unprocessed from my growing up and I'm holding on to it, it is making decisions for me. We think our
Whether we
frontal
want it
lobe
to
is
or not.
making decisions for us, and it's not. What we do is we have a reaction to something based on our fears or unprocessed stuff, and then our frontal lobe quickly makes reasons for why we did that and tells ourselves a story and creates a narrative. Oh, yeah, I just don't. I've never liked it.
I'm just not good at that.
I'm just not good. Whatever. Right. And it's all held in that limbic area and body. So when we have this distress for ourselves and it's held in the body and I'm not processing it, it creates inflammation on a cellular level. There's some things that create inflammation on a cellular level. Deepak Chopra talks a lot about it. Stress creates inflammation on a cellular level. That kind of unprocessed stress, it's toxic to us, like many things, like sugars and alcohol, creates inflammation on a cellular level. All disease, the root of it, Deepak Chopra says, is inflammation.
Inflammation.
On a cellular level. So that unprocessed stuff shows up in these, the ACEs study kind of nails it, right? It says the more of these things you have going on in your childhood, the more likely it is that you'll experience these things later in life.
The only time you don't want a high score is when it's the ACEs test.
Yeah, right? So first time I ever got 100.
Yay, I got all A's! Oh.
Oh, wait. Okay. Time to work on that.
Yeah, so we have this disconnect. So the limbic experience, if I'm a kiddo and I'm like, my body's like, man, it's not safe here. And my frontal lobe's like, I live here, man.
Yep.
Then the
That's
body's
good.
like, well, you're no good. And the frontal lobe's like, you need to shut up because you're causing me a lot of distress.
Yeah.
So our nervous system is always selecting from safe. This is Porges stuff. We're selecting from safe, fight or flight, or shut down. It's always going to select from them. And if our nervous system has good vagal tone, we're able to access safety. We can connect in safety, and then I will jump to fight or flight if there's a large, shattering.
Bear
sound.
crossing the path.
Right. If I have a good vagal tone and I'm in maybe a town where I have a friend there, but I don't know any people, and he's like, come over to this event, that's where I'm going to be, and we have a chance to connect for a minute. And so I might go with a little anxiousness into this event, because there's a bunch, I've never been here, kind of looking for my friend, I hope I find him, there's people around. And then I find my friend, and he goes, hey, over here. And then I will be able to block out all the other sounds and focus on him and that conversation, right? It's selective listening skill that we have if our nervous system allows us to and we're in safety. And I could be talking with my friend even though there's lots of people and stuff going on and just still stay in safety if I have good vagal tone. If a sharp, shattery sound happens right behind me, my head's going to jerk around 100 times faster than my frontal lobe. I don't decide that, right? My heart rate shoots up, my head jerks around. Then my frontal lobe job is supposed to tell my limbic system, it's supposed to assess the situation for me and go, oh, just a broken glass body. No one's in danger here. It's okay. And my body should go, whew, thanks, frontal lobe, for checking that out and letting me know what was going on.
Thanks, Larry.
Should drop again, and I can return to conversation with my friend and go back to safety. People with trauma, we just don't do that. We don't get to safety very well, and we don't stay in safety very well. When you put me in that same environment with a bunch of people behind me, that just ain't going to happen, right? I'm going to be in a corner with my back to the wall and interpreting all of
Not
those
listening to
sounds.
a damn thing your friend's saying.
I don't even know what you're saying right now. Because we're not in safety. We're in this fight or flight mode. Or sometimes, it's especially if I'm a kid and I grow up in this environment and I can't fight or flight, then we'll learn how to dissociate. We just learn how to check out, right? Because I can't pack my bags and leave, right? There's nothing I can do about it. I'm captured here. I just need to check out. And that's our nervous system doing exactly what it's supposed to do to keep us alive.
Yeah.
It's not a problem.
You're not broken.
It's an asset. It's doing exactly what it needs to do to keep us alive until we can get to a place of safety and do something different. And that's where our brain spotting conversation is. That's where I can grow up as an adult. I got this stuff that I wasn't able to do then. My nervous system kept me alive through it. And now here I am, and maybe I can make a different decision for myself. with brain spotting, and there's other stuff, right? We'll talk about that. I know I could talk about this for hours, but if we're into yoga, meditation, this mindfulness stuff, if we have safe others that we can connect with, those are all some ways that help us soothe that internal messaging. But sometimes we're so activated we can't get to safety. And so we're literally creating vagal tone through brain spotting, allowing our brain to re-access safety. And as we do it and we do it and we do it, then we're again able to reestablish a path of coming into safe and staying in safe. And that's what we call vagal tone. When I have good vagal tone, I can get to the fight or flight and I can get back. Porges talks about a lady that was interviewed after she was on a flight coming into DC or something, and the landing gear wouldn't come down. Ooh. And the pilot flies around for a little bit, talking to the tower. He's like, I can't get my landing gear to come down. The tower's like, we've cleared the runway, emergency personnel are out, you're just going to have to land it on his belly. Tell the people. So it comes in, he's like, hey people, here's the deal.
This is what we got to do.
This is what we got to do. As they come down, last second the landing gear comes down, everybody's fine. So there's a reporter there, right? And he's like, I want to talk with one of those people. And he says, lady, as they're getting off the plane, can I talk to you about that? She's like, sure. He's like, what were you thinking and feeling? She's like, thinking? I passed out. Right? The nervous system's like, I got you, lady.
You're just going to get knocked out for a second.
You can't handle this, so let me take this one.
Right? You ever see those adorable pictures of the fainting goats, right? Like their nervous system just goes, you're out.
Ah! Boom. Yeah.
Bam. Just the nervous system taking over so that we can survive. This is your best chance of survival. You go out. It's not a frontal lobe process. We have no way to regulate, no way to we're not in charge of that with our decision maker.
But you can't think your way out of trauma. That's the thought that keeps coming into my brain as I'm hearing you speak. You cannot get your frontal lobe to rationalize this. You can think about why it happened, how it happened, why it shouldn't affect you. But at the end of the day, all of those things are not releasing that stored information from your body, and you're still feeling it. And if you can't release that, you're not going to be able to ever think your way out of it.
So, go ahead.
The more chronic stress we have, the more traumatic experiences or chronic stress, the more compromised the communication is between the limbic area and the frontal lobe. So over time, they just stop talking. Then our limbic area dissociates, it encapsulates, it covers up those memories that we couldn't process to keep us safe from it. So there's literally no way our frontal lobe is going to access that and process it. It's impossible in that state to do that.
So I want to bring up the whole Western medicine thing because this was an important piece I wanted to touch on.
Wait, before you do that, can I ask something that's related to what we've already talked about? Because I do want to talk about that too. But the one piece that stuck out in my mind when we had our initial call with you is you had said, we were talking about ADHD, and you said kids that have ADHD and they get labeled with that diagnosis have the same symptoms as trauma. And that was so powerful to me because you see all of these kids being labeled as having ADHD and getting put on medications when they've just been under duress. They have lived in difficult situations. They've had to experience trauma and they don't have a way to release that from their body.
Yeah, totally. I think, I don't want to discredit ADHD either. I mean, it's a real thing, and people that experience ADHD, they have a series of symptoms that, sometimes great and sometimes not great at all for them to manage. But yeah, there was a big study done about 10 years ago that looked at all 10,000 diagnoses of these 80s, 90s kids with ADHD, and they're like, oh, that just might have been trauma. Because if you put a kid that's growing up in a home that's a traumatic, dysfunctional home, and then put them in class and expect them to focus and sit still, it's impossible. The symptoms that we experience that we say is ADHD is also the symptoms of trauma. So does it create ADHD? Is it only ADHD? I think that's a combination of some both. But for sure, if what I'm looking at is trauma symptoms, not ADHD, giving that kid some Ritalin is probably a really bad idea.
Yes.
That
And
brings me to my Western medicine conversation, because I was going to say a lot of mental health diagnoses like anxiety, depression, PTSD, all of them in the Western medicine side, there is medications that you can take for it. So do the medications work the same way that the brain mapping does, or what's the difference and pros and cons?
Brain spotting, because there is a
Brain spotting.
Brain
It's a
spotting.
little different.
Sorry, brain spotting.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Pharmacology is something that I'm super interested in because I'm a geek. But
We love that about you. This is a safe space for you.
I appreciate that. But I am not an expert in it. But medications, it is a Western process for it. We just got this idea like, I'm busy. Can I please just not do the work and make the symptoms go away? And so it's not just the people prescribing this stuff, it's our society that says, hey, give me just something quick. I don't really want to exercise and eat better.
Yeah, just give me the pill to bring
just-
my blood pressure down.
If I can just, you just give me a pill and I can keep doing this, my same things. So clearly, things like anxiety and depression, while medication sometimes can be a game changer for people and extremely essential for certain people. I do expect we probably overuse it as a Band-Aid and not change the cause of what's going on. We know depression is we call it, I forget what we call it. It comes and goes. So it's a fancy
Intermittent.
Use it in, the music comes and goes. So like if I got no good relationships and I can't afford good food and I can't get outside and exercise and I'm in a dead-end job and I don't really like it, and I'm not sleeping well, like...
Yeah, you're going to be depressed.
Yes. I'm probably...
That sounds depressing.
I probably have some symptoms. Yeah. And if I get a job that is really rewarding, fulfilling, where I get to help other people, and I'm like, what? I get paid too, and and I have good people in my life, and I get a dog, and I'm taking them for walks, and I get to care for somebody else, and I'm outside, and I'm active, and I meet other nice people that like me in the dog park. Like, my symptoms are probably less.
Yeah.
So that's how, and anxiousness happens with that to a degree. Some people are clinically depressed and they have this real resistant depression and they kind of get stuck in these patterns, and anxiety as well. That if we're looking at why I'm anxious, and it is based in these biopsychosocial pieces or whatever, nurture nature stuff. Brain spotting can be so, I can take some anti-anxiety medication or, an antidepressant, and that can be a very helpful piece to get me where I want to go. But until we get to what's causing that, we're gonna just always be reliant on the medication and feeling the best I can feel with the medication. Right? The Western medicine for me, we pathologize things, we label people, we, over-medicate, and that clearly ain't working. Or it wouldn't be getting worse.
Right.
Yeah, it's great for emergency care. If you're having a heart attack, obviously go to the ER. But if you have something chronic that's going on, you have to look at why it is that it's happening.
Yeah.
And if you can't figure it out with your buddy Larry, the frontal lobe here, you have to figure out what's being stored that you don't have access to. And I think brain spotting can be such a game changer for people that are having that scenario.
For everyone.
Yeah.
I think, too, another really powerful piece, and is real different between EMDR and brain spotting. Brain spotting is called it's neuro-experiential, so it's in this moment, whatever is arising, and this co-attunement that's happening, but it's also it's a developmental model. So we can access and process stuff that is what we call pre-verbal. Memory starts forming about 4 or 5 years old with language. Prior to that, our body still holds information. And we can access and process that stuff. If mom is prone to anxiety and then has a super stressful pregnancy, I'm coming out with some stuff.
Already feeling the feelings. Yeah.
There's
All
no
those stress
way-
hormones and stuff are pumping through your body.
Totally. Super toxic for that embryo and that baby. And there's no way for me to go, I'm anxious because of this. I won't even know.
Yeah, you don't remember that.
Right? We can't, but our body.
Larry doesn't remember it. I've labeled him Larry now. That's who he is now forever to me.
And apparently he's a male.
Yes.
No wonder.
Exactly. Damn it, Larry. Get it together.
I've certainly worked with people where this lady was like, man, I just got so much anxiety and I just don't even know why. Because there was no experience in her life that she could associate with that would cause some anxiousness. And we got into brain spotting. Her nervous system goes, oh, there's something right here about that felt sense of anxiety. Frontal lobe had no connections at all. And her body's moving, and during the process, she told me afterwards, I'm thinking like, why is my body doing this? And her frontal lobe was trying to make sense of it. She's like, did I have a head injury or something I don't remember? Like she's trying to make sense of why her body, when their bodies are flinching, and it's our nervous system releasing held distress. That's why somatic movement and Tai Chi and yoga and stuff like that can be so powerful for people. We have to have this movement. And when we have that movement, in the moment of accessing that held distress, it is literally releasing what is held on a cellular level in our body. And she could never tell me. She had
Like
no
what exactly
recollection
that
of why
experience
she
was.
has anxiousness, but her body was getting rid of stuff. And it helped her. Her anxiety was, significantly reduced after just a handful of sessions.
That's
I'm fairly
amazing.
certain I'm gonna put this episode on like some sort of loudspeaker and just force feed people to hear it. Like I feel so passionately about this information that you've given us
Yeah.
that I feel like every human being needs to know.
Yeah.
So if you're a person
absolutely.
listening, like every contact in your phone, just send this episode to them.
Reply all, forward all.
Yeah. And you said you can look up brain spotting in your area, right? And people can go online to learn how to get trained in it. Do you have to be a therapist to do brain spotting, or?
So that's one area that brain spotting is also pretty different. We want to have some kind of grounding and attuning kind of work. So it's not just an anybody, but we have all kinds of healers trained in brain spotting. There are psych nurses trained in brain spotting. There's energy healers, body healers, physical therapists, nurse practitioners. Anybody kind of in that realm can access brain spotting training. Brainspotting.com has a list of upcoming trainings and a pretty comprehensive list of brain spotting clinicians. Everybody who's certified is supposed to be on that list. So you can usually
I know.
find somebody in your area.
I know that telemed is a huge thing right now that developed through COVID, even more so than it already was. Can you do telemed brain spotting?
Yep. I know people that
Cool.
do it completely. It seems to be, at first I'm like, how is that going to work with the attunement or whatever?
Right, the energies.
It works.
It works.
Do
Cool.
you do it?
I do.
Like, can
I
people
do.
call you and, like, I want to work with Charlie. Like, how do I get in touch with you?
Sure. Right now I'm pretty limited to in my state and what I'm doing under the agency I'm working with. We're licensed and working within the state of Alaska. I do a lot. I'm a brain spotting consultant too. So if somebody's out there and interested in brain spotting, a consultant helps the training make sense. And so if you're new in it and you're like, am I on the right track? Or if you want to get certified, then you need some consultant hours as well to do that.
Awesome.
I want to just follow up a little bit, 'cause I know we're wrapping up a little bit here, but you talked about, are we teaching the brain, can we get this vagal tone and get this, right? We know this is our natural use of it. And we teach people in brain spotting, like, this is how you're taking what your body and brain know how to do now, and this is what it will look like when you use it naturally. Naturally, we sometimes just find ourselves like standing on the back deck or staring off into space thinking about something, and it's not up there in the trees at all, right? It is the natural way we access information held in that limbic area of the brain. We are set up to know how to do this. And when we create vagal tone, we reestablish a way to manage and process our stuff. If we have safe relationships, human beings can experience almost anything and not have trauma symptoms. If we have vagal tone and we have some safe relationships with people, we can talk about it and make meaning about our experiences. We can go through almost anything.
That's amazing. Do you have any final last words for any of the listeners, that something that, like a burning something that they would need to know about brain spotting or starting it, or any, or trauma or anything? Just like last final thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to kind of recap, trauma symptoms show up because of our experience, not because of who we are. And we don't have to live with them. In the past, we just didn't have a good way to resolve them, but now we do. I have just so many people that I've worked with, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people with brain spotting, and the results are quick and they are powerful, and it changes people's lives. It just frees us up to live a quality of life that we just can't with those symptoms. And there's no other way that I know of to be able to do that. So grateful that we've stumbled across this thing, and that I get to be a part of doing it with brain spotting therapists all over the world. And so hunt one out and start asking questions.
Awesome. Will do. Yeah. By the way, you guys, I'm going to have an update for you because I want to start this process for myself. So, because as we all are, we're all growing up, we're all learning, we're all dealing. So,
yep.
But I thank you so much, Charlie, for sharing this. This is such a powerful, impactful episode.
We love your nerdy brain.
Yes, yeah, it was
Thanks.
Juicy and delicate and crazy all at the same time, and I love that. So I just appreciate you for taking the time to share this and letting us be the venue of sharing.
The microphone. We were just holding the microphone for you to share all the stuff in your big brain.
Stuff.
And we really appreciate you coming on and just doing that. So that, this stuff can really help people. Mm-hmm. And you taking the time to just share that, I think will make a huge impact in the world. And we're grateful that you came on to do that.
Yes. So thank you. And thank you for all the listeners. Thank you to all the listeners who've made it this far with us in our journey, and keep on listening because we have a whole month of awesome healing professionals.
This is my favorite month of the whole podcast. It's been fantastic.
Same. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Don't go anywhere, Charlie.